Hello.
Hi, everyone. We are gathering together to have a conversation, and the topic that we're talking about is grief. How, realizing, how everybody deals with grief, or what can we do maybe to encourage other people who are going through grief, things like that. And we all know that there's plenty of grief or just people being despondent and feeling despair, whether it's due to loneliness or whether the grief is you actually have lost somebody that you love dearly has passed away, or you've just lost friends that haven't passed away, but your life has changed, and it's changed in a way that has brought you confusion and an unhappiness, and you're just not really sure how to maneuver forward. So yeah. Life is full of many ups and downs. There's no doubt about that. And without the bad times, without the challenging moments, we wouldn't realize and be as thankful for the good times. And it really is something that helps us along the way to appreciate what it's like to, have those good times and be thankful for what we do have. And all of us, have our moments, and our brain will say, well, there's certain things that you know that you have all these other wonderful things, in your life, but to feel it and to really, digest that is hard for any one of us at any given time. Okay. Then the all-knowing, and then what the heart might say, and getting it all in sync is a whole nother thing, right? And you cannot put a timeline on any kind of grief. Just because you process loss in whatever form doesn't mean that everybody is that way. I mean, you can't put anybody in a box and say this is the right way, the only way. No, it doesn't work like that. And we just have to be compassionate and respectful, particularly, well, even for people you don't know who are going through it. And we'll expound on things more. I mean, everybody's got some really good pearls, I'm sure, but I know that some people, we when we don't know what to say, it might be better off to not necessarily say anything, but offer a hug, a smile, or whatever, because I know some people get just as offended, if you will, or it actually makes it worse if you say, well, I know how it feels, or, you're trying to be helpful a lot of times, but you really don't, you know what I mean? Always know how they're feeling. So with that being said, I'm sure we'll both just kind of go round robin like, or just kind of have a little coffee chat type thing. But who wants to interject on that one? I know that Dana had some good ideas for what it was connected to.
I'm interested in the topic on a kind of a neurological,
right,
from the perspective of neuropsychiatry, because I know this is something I like to research things, and this is something I've already researched, and that's why the topic was interesting to me, and actually quite timely, everything considering. And the thing is about our brain doesn't recognize. The neurologists have a saying that the brain is agnostic when it comes to grief. The brain doesn't differentiate whether we have a grief or a loss of a pet, of a family member, a divorce, a loss of a friendship, a loss of trust, a loss of anything. And or maybe it's an emptiness situation, or maybe it's retiring, or maybe it's an injury due to illness. Maybe it's we lost a limb, and now all of a sudden we can't go around and scamper around. That none of that really matters, because our brain is dealing with the grief in a similar way, either way. And in our brain, we have a kind of a place called homeostasis, where we normally are. Now, when we perceive a danger, the kind of a survival instinct kicks in the brain, and we go into heightened stress situation. And after the kind of a fight or flight situation is over, there comes the exhaustion, almost kind of a like emotional exhale. And then our brain goes back to the homeostasis. If the brain doesn't return to homeostasis, it stays on the heightened, continuous kind of like chronic stress level. And this is where we start to talk about PTSD. And the chronic stress is not a very great thing at all. And I listened to a lecture by a well-renowned neurologist. Her name is Lisa M. Schulman. I'm going to read my notes so I don't mess up anything, because I took notes. And she has a book out, and it's called Before and After Loss, a neurologist's perspective on loss, grief, and our brain. And this is being published by Johns Hopkins University Press. And she said you can find this book from Amazon or from Johns Hopkins publishers. And yeah, the thing is that she was talking a lot about neuroplasticity. What that means is our neurons are growing and trying to reach other neurons. When they do, they create a neural path. Now, if we are in a heightened stress or fight or flight moment, our body is producing cortisol. Now, that's when the neurons stop growing. If we don't get sleep, if we don't get rest, our neurons don't grow. We don't get new neural pathways. And one of the common kind of a nominators with people with prolonged stress and chronic stress is that they lose certain cognitive functions, such as there is a memory loss, there is inability to perform, reasonable sentences. You start losing words and just forgetting the most, mundane things. So it's almost like you have a prefrontal or frontal lobe dementia. The symptoms are quite the same, actually. But the neuroplasticity moves in both directions. When you do get enough stress and the traumatic loss is over here. So this is where the neuroplasticity can learn to remain in that crisis mode, but also neuroplasticity can learn to get over, to go back to the homeostasis. And that is when we can teach our brain. It's like a toddler, really. It's a muscle. You can train it, which is pretty fantastic, come to think of it. And but chronic stress is it is what neurology calls pervasive effects on mind, body, memory, behavior, sleep, and changes in body function, immune system, heart function. Takotsubo syndrome, which is broken heart syndrome, it really is ballooning of the ventricle of the heart, the left side of the heart. And but there are healing kind of like healing supporting practices. And the neurologist, she really liked a sentence written by Joan Didion in a book, another good book. I've actually read this earlier, The Year of Magical Thinking, by Joan Didion, if I didn't mention. And the quote is, "What? It's only dreaming or writing that I could find out what I thought." Because the reading, dreaming and writing was the two things she said that are, in her opinion, one of the two most beneficial practices we can do when we are in the grieving process. Because the funny thing is, really, I found all kinds of studies on grief and grieving. But when it came to studies, how to get to the other side of the grief, the other side of sadness, there isn't as much studies. So the studies are about the grief and grieving process. But you know what really I think would be beneficial for people to know is how to get to the other side. But there wasn't as much information there. But she was a treasure trove of the kind of a healing practices, what you can do. And she mentioned creativity, music was there, and journaling, and it's she mentioned two things about journaling, which I will read from my journal here. Opportunity for reflection in the moments and then later reappraisal. Oftentimes I write in my journal just to figure out how I think about things, kind of like to clear your mind. Also, writing for yourself and no one else, no one to censor your thoughts to. Because she said that in human brain, we are hardwired for survival. So when we talk with people, whether we mean it or not, the message is not uncensored. We always kind of transform the message in accordance to social function we are in. And she also mentioned dreams, and there's a sentence in Sigmund Freud's book, The Interpretation of Dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind, because they are very potential tool. They do tell one or few things, and I think our dreams are largely misunderstood as much. It's not just the dreams, but the thing is, the book is quite hefty. I've read this back in the days. It's nearly 600 pages. If you want to find this book, it's called the Sleep Therapy, and in German this is Die Traumdeutung. I have this in Finnish, but basically the brain is always rewiring itself in response to experience. I thought that sentence was absolutely beautiful. I wrote it word to word what she said. And she also said, if we don't process the trauma we've gone through, these traumas, they will continue to be an obstacle in our lives. And the thing is, when it comes to going to the other side of grief, now there are many different kinds of grief. And I'm actually going through something that is, I found a name for it today, called anticipatory and anticipatory. Yeah, that's the used pronunciation and anticipatory in British English. So anticipatory grief, when you are expecting something to happen, you can't help it. You just wait and watch the thing fade away and to be removed from your life. So that is something you kind of know what to expect, but it doesn't make the situation any more easy. Or if anything, it just prolongs it. And another study that is being made about the brain is when you are in grief, when you are in sadness, it's very useful to be mindful to not let it sink into depression, which can be very difficult and chronic phenomena. And the one thing you can do to kind of I wouldn't say fight that, but almost like to pre-medicate the situation is you need to introduce the elements of hope into your life. Because you can't take away the experience away. That is forever in your story. What you went through, whether that was the end of a marriage, the death of a loved one, whatever that was, what you lost, that thing is now gone from your life. You can't get it back. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You experienced that loss, whether that was a loss of friendship even. It happened. those words were said, those people left your life, whatever the situation was. But you go through the experience to the other side, but also introduce an element of hope into your life. The thing that happened doesn't define you. That was when I was working in a hospital, it was almost the psychiatric nurses, they were always like, I'm just such a psychiatric person. And a friend of mine, he used to work in, he actually was more, on the surgical side of when it came to nursing, but he was doing kind of almost like a second shift on the psychiatric, and he was like, I don't go over there and I say I'm kind of a very surgical person. And it's true. The thing is, what we do, what we experience, we are not those people. Those are outside experiences, outside of our bodies, outside of our energy field. Those are things that happen to us. Those are the things that happen within our personal relationships or within our family. Actually, you can kind of separate the two. But anyways, those situations are not you. They do not define you. They do not define your value. So it's good to kind of remind yourself to separate yourself from the situation. It doesn't mean that you have to be heartless about it. But also, you have to stand within yourself and understand that you do the decisions for you. You will go forward and just introduce new things, better things. Today wasn't a wonderful day for me because of the situation. I'm kind of almost waiting to dissipate. And but I chose to write on my commonplace book. Basically, ever since I got up, I took a day off, and I did the things that bring me most joy because I needed that. The situation that I have going on doesn't define me, but I can't possibly go back in time and have the situation undone. But I can take ownership in how I choose to
react,
feel about today. Because that is something that is in my control. I don't control anyone else. No one does. No one controls me. And whatever happens to other people and everyone in this life is basically in their control. And we just have to take the life situations as they are and then make a judgment for ourselves and cope with the situation to the best of our abilities, while in the process of trying our darnest to not hurt anyone else.
And usually we come out of it with a renewed viewpoint. We've learned something from each little step like that, each little road bump or speed bump that we go through. Life is definitely going to always have its good days and bad days, or ups and its downs. And so basically learning how to accept what you can't control, or you have no way to change it, and acknowledge it for what it was and what it did and how it made you feel. Be really clear about everything, how it affected you, and then just kind of lay it to the side and say, I'm done with that. I'm going to do better next time, or I at least know the signs maybe of whatever it is, and I can maybe learn how to approach it differently next time. But the body does, physically, talking about the physical aspect, the body does always want to heal itself. It's a phenomenal, our bodies are phenomenal in that regard. And I think along the way we just learn new tools, whether it's new, like you say, fun things that you can do to bring you joy, or the way you just change your thinking about some things. I've heard it said, you get rid of your stinking thinking. There's a lot of reason why we might have that kind of a thought, you know what I mean, what's going on in our mind. But yes, and honestly, it does make you stronger on the outside, on the other side of things as well. And this is where you also will learn who is in your corner. You will learn when the chips are down and whatnot. Certainly you can't really, the only person you can rely on is yourself, always. And your inner, divine source and those kind of things. But hopefully there is at least one person that you can get some comfort from or acknowledgement from or whatnot. And you're surprised many times the person that is, because sometimes it's not the person you thought that would be there for you. And the true blues, as they say.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. And another thing about brain function is and she, of course, she's right. She mentioned that, when a physical trauma happens to our brain, how it affects on the cognitive function. And if, say, a concussion, she used this as an example. When a person is, unfortunately, I have all too much experience on this, like that, and the grief of, say, why that happened, and the kind of alterations in brain function. It takes a lot of from the brain to rebuild itself, but neuroplasticity will see you to the other side if there are tools to be used, and of course depending on the damage and what kind of a help you manage to get at the time. But yeah, it's this life is much more complicated than, we could just, look at people on the outside. We don't know what they are going through. We don't know what is happening in their lives. We don't know the makeup of their entire lifespan, their childhood, their kind of a formative years, their very early childhood, and how people are, how they can deal with grief themselves, how they can, basically how emotionally mature they are. There are such differences. And on the other hand, you can't demand from people more than they can give you, because that would be morally unjust just as well. So sometimes you just have to do what is right for you, considering the circumstances, even while you understand the other person's limitations.
Yep.
You
have anything to say, Miss Stephanie?
Yes. I have to back a little bit. I did try and do some research on grief, and it was very difficult to find anything other than like a loss, of a person. But I kept digging and I kept digging, and I found, that grief disrupts or challenges our sense of normalcy or ourselves, including loss of connections that define us. So, again, it's so broad. Don't think it's just one thing, just the loss of a person or animal, or anticipatory grief. And I saw that as well. And they only use that in terms of, like if somebody has a long-term illness, but it's not. We've all been going through, anybody who's followed this group, we've all had anticipatory grief because things are not what we thought that they would be, given the information that we've been told. We've been, dragged along all this time thinking that we would be in a completely different world at this point.
Right.
So, and I agree about like music, and I can tell you that, like, for me, this past week, there's been a lot of emotions at play for me. And I actually was talking to somebody else and they had kind of the same feeling. I had days where I was just like so grumpy, days where I like wanted to cry, but I played music that made me cry because I'm not normally a big crier, but there's that release that you have to have many times. And yeah, and not to let it go into depression. Depression causes you to sink or press down. And I've always felt, and this is not in every case, but the opposite of depression is action. So like, I imagine like when you're depressed, you don't want to do anything. You want to just sit and kind of be in that grief or that sorrow or that. So the you have to be in that space for a while, absolutely. But the way to get through it, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, is to take action and to get up and to move, to go out in nature, and that's the best way, because when you're out in nature, that's like 100% true. Watching the birds flying, looking at flowers and plants and things. And I think it's very important. And I do also feel like we kind of work some of this stuff out in our dreams. I've had some really weird dreams lately too that we haven't really talked about lately, but you do work some things out in your dreams, and some of it plays out in weird ways that you have to kind of analyze it. But yeah, I mean, it does this. Yeah, I can't talk about the dreams too much, but yeah, I've had some of those as well. And I wanted to share one other thing that I saw this today. And when you need to take self-care, you can say I'm busy. And I found this, and it suits it perfectly. I lied and said I was busy. I was busy, but not in a way most people understand. I was busy taking deeper breaths. I was busy silencing irrational thoughts. I was busy calming a racing heart. I was busy telling myself I'm okay. Sometimes this is my busy, and I will not apologize for it. So don't be afraid to say things like that and do things like that, and to go through it, because it is important.
You're right. There's so many different levels of grief, like you said.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And to a certain degree, some of that kind of grief is certainly our own making. Like, you know what I mean? Trying to, like you say, anticipate or maybe try to live in somebody else's world, really, the way that they want you to be, and you're not your authentic self. That would be a form of like almost being in your own movie or your own play. You're not really who you are. And how can that be comfortable long term? That cannot be, right?
And that is actually a meaning of, say, if you expect if a relative is very sick, so you're basically just waiting for them to transform, so to anticipate that. Yeah, so that is kind of like funny. You should I love that that quote you said, Stephanie. I found something beautiful today, and I insist I need to read it too. This is from a book from Victoria Erickson. She writes beautifully. I crave the ones who've seen confusion and known struggle, who have pulled themselves up from the shackles of heartache and strife, disappointment and darkness, exhaustion and drain, and have risen with a heart as open and unwaveringly wide as the ocean itself. Give me those people, the brave, the vulnerable, the wise, the ones who care for the world and how to better it along with themselves, to know their ability in making waves, in shifting patterns with tides, and in creating change. Let us become that open ocean and make it rise.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Like that.
Nice.
Eloquently said. Yeah.
Sure, it's beautiful. I have another poem. It's not as glorious, but sometimes very, poignant too. It's very short too. Let it die. Let there be new beginning. It's awful. Good night.
I guess that is short.
From Charles Bukowski.
Oh. Well, I was actually going to read something that many people have probably heard before too, and it's called After a While, and it's by Veronica A. Schofstall. After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul, and you learn that love doesn't mean leaning, and company doesn't mean security. And you begin to learn that kisses aren't contracts and presents aren't promises, and you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes ahead, with the grace of a woman or a man, not the grief of a child. And you learn to build all your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans, and futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you get too much. So you plant your own garden and you decorate your own soul instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, that you really are strong, and you really do have worth. And you learn, and you learn. With every goodbye, you learn. So
Beautiful.
yeah, some of those
True.
things that, yeah, they pertain to various types and whatnot, for sure. But I think that no matter what we're going through, realize that everything can and will change, right? It will. We've overcome challenges before. Some weren't as monumentous as others. It's all a learning experience, and not getting what you want can be sometimes a blessing too, that you realize later, because as they say, hindsight being 2020. But allow yourself to have fun. Be kind to yourself. That's one of the best things you can do, best medicine. And other people's negativity isn't worth worrying about, and there is always something to be thankful for. So we're all in this experience together, and we need to just be mindful of our neighbor, even strangers that we don't know. Like you said, or one of you said, we don't know at any given time by just looking at somebody what they're going through. I mean, the most monumentous change and victory for them might have been something that to us seems very insignificant. So how can you put a comparison on that? You know what I mean?
You can't. But on the other hand, if they've not met with the challenges, at the kind of a scale we have, we don't have a moral ground to judge anyone, because they may be functioning at the kind of a like with everything they have, but they might not have that much. So basically, water your own garden. That's the only thing we can do.
Right. Yeah. And instead of having judgment about how somebody else might be proceeding in their path or dealing with their situation, try to turn it into compassion. Try to have some understanding and offer a kind word or something like that. You know what I mean? Just be as gracious, and sometimes just a simple smile. Like you're in public transit, you don't even know that person or whatever, and you see them and they look a little worried, and you just kind of smile. Give them a nice warm smile, and you'd be surprised. Sometimes it's the very thing that they just kind of needed, something to kind of break their trance, if you will. And that's happened.
You can do the same for yourself as well. I mean, self-compassion, self-love, no more
most definitely. The man in the mirror. There's a poem on that somewhere too. I just don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to I was just thinking something you said, Juliann, just brought this thought in my mind that when it comes to something, you know, whatever people say, however they, you know, how they behave towards us, in the end, it has nothing to do with us,
Right.
but it's them giving their own calling card.
Right.
It's them presenting themselves energetically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to remember that when we communicate with others, we are presenting our calling card as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you like your calling card to be perceived?
Mm-hmm.
So there are both sides of the mirror there.
Mm-hmm. We're very powerful. I mean, we're powerful in everything we do in our actions.
Mm-hmm.
We're powerful with the words that we say. We've talked about words and spells and how that just kind of is huge as well. So it can be super and beautiful, and it can be complicated all at the same time. We really do have a lot going on. And if we've to just be able to cruise in life a little bit, even if we have some adversity here and there, you know, we're dealing with a lot of things. We're handling so much,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
And so much
but life is not
that won't be shown on the surface.
Yeah.
And so much that won't be said out loud as well.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, we are just recognizing that, especially now, there's a lot of people, for whatever reason, that are just discombobulated. Is that the word? Or just kind of feeling a little bit off balance. And, you know, even if you're not dealing with something that's super, that causes you deep grief, it's still something that disconnects you from your reality that you had before. And change in itself is not easy. In fact, I think as I've gotten older, you know, change is something that I have to kind of think about how how do I think about that, you know? And I think of technology or all this other stuff. It's all change, right? You just, you know, meet it with fresh eyes and try to look at it in a positive way if you can. And there's going to be days. There's days you can't. It's hard to be positive some days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I think we should think of ourselves like here is the secret garden.
Yeah.
Not everyone gets to step in. Like, if you come into my world, if you come into, you know, if you brush against my soul, wipe your feet.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are boundaries here. So it's good to kind of remember that you take ownership of you. No one gets to decide for you. And when you do take ownership over you and your boundaries, there may be adversity towards that, because it is usually when people are used to kind of shimmy in and kind of almost like draw in energy and or seek out certain situations. They are used to that. Now, where they are, all of a sudden there are boundaries that someone presents, like this is not okay. They may not like that. And reactions may happen. Just remember that the reactions are a mirror image of them. Just like your actions are mirror image of themselves. Like our actions are mirror images of us.
Yeah, and I think that as you've, you know, we've lived long enough, as you live and you age and whatever with your experiences, you learn to take charge of your life better. I mean, hopefully you've learned what you will allow, what is comfortable, and what you won't stand, you know, what you won't stand for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
and if you're confused and get frustrated, take a step back.
Yeah.
And say, okay, it's time to come back to center again. And, you know, be willing to admit, okay, I have to calm down. I have to do this in a different way, or, you know, calm myself down, say I'm busy and need to go within, and don't be afraid to do that, because it's so important.
That's what I have a team meeting every morning with my peeps, and they told me practically told me to take several steps back. And that wasn't the first time. I'll be first to call up my own, what. Anyways, so that is why I was busy today doing absolutely nothing. I didn't clean. I didn't even make my bed. And that is something I usually not, just don't do. Nothing. I didn't even cook. I ate what I have in the fridge, what I did, what I cooked yesterday. Because I was busy today.
And that's okay. That's okay, because those things are going to be waiting for you. They're going to be there no matter what, and when you get there. But yes,
unfortunately, when it comes to cleaning and,
not being so reactionary, you know what I mean? And stepping back and listening and, now what do I do? How do I respond? So yeah, it's going to always give you a little better outcome for sure.
Absolutely.
But anything else, ladies?
Just take care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow.
Don't be afraid to say no and to say you're busy.
Yeah. The right people appreciate you. Okay. The right people value you and your energy and your time. So
and the people that leave your life.
Yeah.
It's like, my son asked me when he was in ground school, and he said that, Mom, sometimes when you pull up to the schoolyard, there are teachers who run away. How do you do that? Why do they do that? And I told him, honey, that's just garbage taking itself out. And he was like, how do you do that? And I told him, just be honest. Because, people who are honest, they don't have to have this excellent memory, because usually people are creating these facades, etc. But, his situation was different. There was a lot of allergies and a lot of special needs that needed to be minded, that they weren't so motivated in following. And that led to different situations health-wise. So just, I'd like to say, remember your boundaries, but be kind. Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Don't expect more from the others that they can give you. But understand that other people's behaviors towards you are a reflection of themselves, but also remember that your behavior is a reflection of you. And when you are in grief, when you are in sadness, on the other hand, don't be afraid to experience it fully. I mean, wallow. How else can you get up? But eventually do get up. And find something, anything that brings you joy, even if it's just, making the bed, even if it's once a week.
And I think when you actually go through those, I like the point that you say, don't be afraid to feel it. Don't be afraid to experience, because, and some people for some reason have more adversity and more grief or, despondency in their life than others, but it does authenticate you when it comes to, you'll be put in a path for somebody else at some other moment that you'll be equipped. You will, in full confidence and out of love, be able to help that person genuinely, and they will need it at that time. There will be no coincidences there. You will be led to the person you need to be with to help them in that, just as somebody has probably helped you in the past.
I mean, look at the two of you.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Because you were guided to me.
Well, I am very thankful for our family and you being in my life, both of you being in my life. And so friends are just treat them like gold, and again, good friends that are going to stick by you. Their actions will speak louder than their words many times too. So it's in your heart when things are feeling right. So we wish you all out there the very best path that you can find. I mean, that's if you are going through something, I hope that that there's always hope, and go do something that makes
nothing
you.
will last forever. Correct. Even these grievances. Just be brave and face them.
Mhm.
Because I also think that we are not given anything we can't get over.
Yeah.
And when it feels like this is it, I can't take, I've been there.
Mhm.
You have no idea how many times I've been there. There's been months. But the thing is, sometimes just going through the day, making it through the day is enough. You don't have to do anything else. Just make it through the day, and another day comes.
Yeah, it's just like
And then
anything.
you make it through that day.
Mhm. Yeah.
And before you know, a month has passed, 6 months have passed, a year has passed.
And then
And
to be grateful to that you were able to take that time for yourself,
yeah,
because gratitude does make change, also positive change.
yeah.
So it will bring you to a better place as well.
And maybe you chose to go through that.
Yes.
Maybe it didn't come in a package where you originally agreed to.
Yeah.
But there was a reason why that situation was put on your path.
And
There
not
was a
only,
reason why the person was put on your path.
correct. And not
He
only
or she
will
may
it,
have been a blessing or a lesson.
yeah, not only will it cause you to inwardly learn to love yourself more when you have gone through that, it just might bring out the warrior in you, and
Mhm.
the lion that you must be, or whatever, give you what you need to move forward in the next step. So
Mhm.
You can do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, everyone, I hope that this was a conversation that you found a few pearls in, and just know that you're not alone. And tomorrow, there will always be sun shining somewhere. You know what I mean? There's always going to be the rainbow or the silver lining. There always is. But
And
we have a
that's the
little,
paradox, really, because sun never doesn't shine
yeah,
to the planet. It's just that sometimes there are clouds there in front,
yeah,
but
Or it's on
eventually
the other side.
Yeah.
they will eventually kind of the wind will take care of them.
yep. So we wish you all a happy day or evening or wherever you are. And until the next time. So
Take care, everybody.
yep. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.